There's a couple other documents, well, at least one other document I want to go over with you. How to succeed in this course. This, if you click on the syllabus and course calendar link, it will bring up these files. It's also in the week 1 folder. Classroom decorum is here, email etiquette. But how to succeed in this course summarizes all of those issues that I already talked about in the previous video about coming to class on time, act professionally. You're responsible for the work you do and ultimately the grades you receive in this class. In order to be successful in any college course, you must take charge of your own education. The following points will help you to be successful in this class. Access Blackboard regularly, complete readings before coming to class, allow yourself enough time to print readings out. Sometimes you don't have to print them every time. If you just bring good notes on the reading, that should help you. But there are times when I'll indicate that you should bring readings to class. Take detailed notes. Be open-minded toward the class material, regardless of your personal opinion. Think about what you can learn from the readings, even if you do not agree with all the points. This helps to promote a positive class experience for everyone. I noticed this more so in graduate classes than undergrad classes. It's something that everyone has to learn, and it's a process that you continue to learn. Being intelligent doesn't mean coming up with whatever cookie-cutter critiques you can come up with in the moment. Sometimes people think being critical of a reading and being negative is intelligence. But in true academic intellectual readings of pieces, true intelligence is not being able to nitpick it apart, but reading the piece, coming away from it, being able to say, these are the questions that the author has set out to answer. And these are the questions that they actually answer by the end of the piece. These are the key points. This is the big picture. So don't get hung up too much on what we call the trees. So when we say, make sure you can see the forest for the trees. The trees are all the little tiny details. Don't nitpick on those so much. See the forest. See the big picture. And also it takes true intelligence knowing which trees to really pick out that really build the forest, what really makes the bigger points. So it's a very important intellectual tool that you'll hone throughout your life. But that being positive, come to the readings with the idea of what can I learn from this piece, because it is very hard to get published in academia. It's not like writing a piece and getting it published in a newspaper. It's not the same process, or publishing in a self-published work or a non-academic work. Publishing in academia is a very detailed, tedious process, and your work is reviewed at every point. So once your piece is published, there's something in there. And there's something that can be learned in any of these pieces. So that's the approach you should have. Make sure that you're open-minded about the readings and always asking, what can I learn? Our first reading of the semester is all about this, the sociological imagination. In it, C. Wright Mills, whose book has now topped the list of some of the most influential books, he talks about stepping outside of your personal orbits and distinguishing a personal trouble from a public issue. If you go to our first day intro PowerPoint, some of the issues are discussed here in the ideas that we challenge in sociology. And in this course, these are 5 ideas that we will challenge throughout the entire semester. You can think of these statements as myths because the research shows that they are myths. But it's something that the everyday average person thinks, they believe, they tend to still believe in these myths. Everything is natural. Right? Inequality, racial segregation, gender, these are all natural. We'll learn that despite the dominant story in society, the evidence shows that these are not natural phenomenon. Racial segregation, for example, was not created because people naturally did not want to be around those who were racially different. In fact, we'll learn that race, quote unquote black and white, had to be created. People we now see as black and white, in fact, naturally integrated. We had to create laws to get them to separate from each other. So that racial segregation was not natural. And this is firmly established by scientific study. However, science and research does not often inform the average citizen in the U.S. Many people continue to believe in myths, and we'll cover that also in our readings of anti-intellectualism in American life. 2, social change is linear. The idea that racism or sexism is a thing of the past and that it's getting better. Social change is not that simple. Every study in the social sciences as a whole shows that patterns of change are complicated. Racist and sexist ideologies haven't disappeared, but they've taken new, more subtle forms. Most patterns in terms of inequality reveal a U-turn, right? Where racial gaps, for example, were getting better right after the civil rights movement, but then they reversed and they actually got worse. Post late 60s, early 70s, we saw a U-turn. So we didn't see things automatically getting better in terms of racial wage gaps, for example, or wealth gaps. Wealth gaps have always been getting worse. So we might think, oh, things are getting better and it's all going to change. It depends on what social patterns are happening, what's happening structurally. So in the late 60s and 70s, we saw backlash to civil rights programs because in the late 1960s and 1970s in the US, we were saying that we don't have any racial problems. It's the 70s. All that stuff was before. We've really come a long way. We don't need any civil rights policies because it's now the 70s. So think about that because that's something that we tend to still say, and that's something we've been saying for a long time. In fact, right after the end of slavery, that's when much of the backlash towards affirmative action started. Because right after, with Reconstruction, the idea was that, oh, we've taken care of that. African Americans really aren't disadvantaged. So that's something to think about in terms of this myth that social change is linear. 3, younger people are more progressive. Attitudes have more to do with cohort than with age. So that means generation. So it's not about age, it's about what your generation experiences. So we find that those people who have gone through the generation that has experienced the civil rights movement tend to be more progressive in their ideas. Even more so than some generations, newer, more recent generations of folks. So it's not about how old you are; it's what your generation experiences. So unfortunately, it's not a matter of waiting for these old folks to die out in order to have a better society. It depends it's more about their cohort. So it's important to keep that separate, generation or cohort from age. The media is just entertainment. We take a hard look at how racist and sexist images in media and advertisement have a history. In my past classes, we critiqued Disney films, which can be unsettling because many of us grew up with those films and think of them as completely innocent. So in this class, we challenge dominant ideologies, and sometimes that can feel uncomfortable. But discomfort is an important part of learning. And so it's not just entertainment. There's a history there. Or we said that blackface minstrelsy, or European Americans wearing blackface to show that they were white. We used to say that that was just entertainment. So again, keep this in mind. The history behind this is very important. Bootstraps are meritocracy myths, that certain groups gain success through hard work alone. There are inequalities in our educational system, in where we live, in the workplace that can impact success. And those inequalities have much to do with race, class, gender, and disability. The myth that it's just about hard work has been an ideology that has sustained inequality since the 70s. Okay, these are some core American values that Robert Williams, the sociologist in 1970, laid out that seem positive but can have negative consequences. Equal opportunity, achievement and success, material comfort, activity and work, practicality and efficiency, democracy and enterprise, and freedom. These are all seemingly positive values that have negative consequences. So you can think about what could possibly be the negative impact of these kinds of positive ideas. Some of my work looks at well-intended positive values like colorblindness, the idea that I don't see color. Right? So I write about how colorblind ideology has negative consequences for doing anything about racism because if I don't see color, then there's nothing to talk about. So it shuts down any discussion of the problem of racism. So that statement, I don't see color, I see people, has been used to more as first of all, it's not even true, right? Research shows that people in fact do see color. But really, it's a strategy. It's a strategy to stop talking about racism or prevent talking about racism. So the negative effects of positive values. There's also a number of psychologists and those in management who are rethinking positive thinking. And so what they find is that fixating too vigorously on goals can distort organizations' overall mission in a desperate effort to meet some narrowly defined target. And several management scholars have found this. One of the studies was described in Wall Street Journal, and it was speaking to the dangers of practicality. This was a study conducted by management scholar Lisa Ordonez